right. Okay, welcome everyone to our rescheduled routine refresh workshop. I have been practicing saying that and I still can't say it, but we are diving into a slightly new type of workshop today. For the last year or so, all of my workshops have kind of been within the same theme, but over the last couple of months, I have been talking to a lot of people about routines. They just seem to come up all the time. And one thing that I've realized is that there's a lot of feelings around routines and there's a lot of potential judgment around routines. And so I wanted to do this workshop focusing on refreshing these things that we do on a daily basis or revisiting some of the rituals, habits, routines, et cetera, that we have. But I also didn't share as much about how I want to kind of change the way that we talk about routines. Because I thought that might scare some people off. So I just wanted everyone to think that we were just going to come in here and rewrite routines and be good to go. But we're going to talk a little bit about some other things too. We will be doing that. During this session, we will be kind of walking through a visualization. It's still a fairly similar layout to what I normally do within the workshops, just a slightly different approach. So we'll be doing a little bit of visualization. This time, instead of doing emotional freedom technique, I'm going to have us practice some Ho'oponopono, which I really struggle to say, and I don't want to say wrong, but basically it's a practice of forgiveness. I've done it in other workshops, but it's been a while since I've done that. So we'll do a little bit of that, but that will mostly be homework. And then we will go into the planning and the redoing of routines and the refreshing of routines. So that's kind of what you can expect from our time together. So to dive in though, let's see here. Well, first of all, I would love for you all to just get comfortable and make sure that you have a pen and paper or just something that you can take notes on, whether that's your phone or computer or whatever you want. Totally up to you. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about why I kind of came up with this new workshop. I've had a lot of clients lately who come to me and they say, I want to talk about routines. And so I say, okay, why do you want to talk about your routines? And often the answer is then because I'm bad at it. And again, I ask, why do you think you're bad at it? And they say, because I struggle to do what I say that I want to do. I can relate. And so one of the things that we tend to talk about once someone has said, I'm bad at this and I'm not consistent and I struggle to continue doing the things that I should be doing, is that we focus on the should word. And we also focus on what outcome it is that they're looking for. Because oftentimes I find that, myself included, people tend to have these elaborate routines or elaborate ideas of routines that they'd like to have in their lives. It typically comes up in the form of a morning routine, but there are other types of and times for routines, obviously. But, when I ask someone, how do those practices, how does that routine serve you? A lot of the times they can't answer that question, or a lot of the times they can't answer, what it is they're trying to get out of that routine. And that's something that I really want to focus on today. Is this idea of not just having routines for routine's sake, not just having these practices we do because some CEO did them at 5:30 in the morning and made $1 million, but instead because we have a specific outcome that we're looking for, a specific way that we would like to feel. And this is something that helps us get there. The other piece of today's workshop, and something that comes up a lot in my conversations, is around self-criticism, shame, judgment, and just generally being mean to yourself when it comes to routines. This is something I experienced a lot of over the last year and a half. I used to be like the most adamant morning routine person. I had like my whole thing and I did it every single morning, no matter what. And ever since I left my 9-to-5 job and have been working for myself and moved across the country and got a dog and got married and, just like a couple of things that happened in life. Suddenly this morning routine doesn't work for me. And I spent a lot of months being really upset about the fact that I couldn't do this morning routine anymore, and that, I couldn't get myself out of bed, and I couldn't drink the lemon water, and I couldn't blah, 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 blah. And it's taken me a lot of time and effort to get past that and to recreate routines and to see routines as something different in my life now than it was, 5, 6, 7 years ago. So those are the two big things I hope that you'll get out of our session today. Really, this idea of how does this routine serve me? What am I trying to get out of it? And eliminating and letting go of any self-criticism, blame, shame, judgment that comes along with it. So here are some reasons that you might be here today. You might feel stuck. You might feel uninspired. You might feel scattered. Maybe your current routines feel really forced, and they're not something that you're enjoying anymore. Or maybe you just feel like you don't have a lot of consistency, and that's something that you would like to bring in more into your life. So all that being said, what I hope you walk away with today are the ability to release things that no longer serve you, even if it's, how that CEO supposedly made $1 million. I hope you walk away with permission to experiment and find satisfaction and pleasure in your routines rather than this kind of forced, like to-do list type situation. And I also hope that you walk away with a framework to help you refresh your routines whenever you need them, and the permission to do that along the way. So I want to start off today with a visualization practice. It's normally how I start off. Big fan of visualization. So I'm going to walk you through what should be a pretty short practice. So just get comfortable, grab your notebook and pen and have them close by. And once you start to ground down into your seat, you're welcome to lay down. You can turn your camera off if that feels better for you. I want you to start just kind of sinking into the moment. Option to close your eyes. Starting to take a few deep breaths. And placing your hands over top of your heart. Take a deep breath in, filling up belly, low chest, low ribs, and chest. And exhale, release all the way out. Keeping your hands on your heart and continuing to breathe. I want you to remind yourself that this is a no self-judgment zone. Whatever comes up in this visualization, let it be met with curiosity and awe and not judgment. Option to release your hands down to your side. Now I want you to think back to envision a time where you were in flow, where your life seemed like it just moved along with very little effort, very little challenge. Or maybe it was just a time when you felt your best. Doesn't mean that the time wasn't a challenging time or that you weren't doing hard things, but you personally felt the best that you've ever felt. What is it that you were doing in that time? What was your life and the world like around you? And during this time of flow and of happiness and presence and power, what types of routines did you have? What is it that you did on a daily basis or a weekly basis? What did you do consistently? Picturing a day in your life during this time, what do you notice about those consistent actions? During this time of flow, what feelings did you have? What experiences were you going through? How did you carry yourself as you walked through your everyday life? How did you spend your time, whether it be work or service or fun? And what responsibilities did you have? Now, having pictured all of that, I want you to allow yourself to be that person right now. Feel the feelings, embody that experience, and take note of any physical sensations you might be feeling as you embody the person that you once were. Now, slowly start to release those feelings, making your way back into this moment, this person, this body, and back into the room. Once you're back, let's take the next 3 minutes to brain dump anything and everything that came up for you. Feelings, memories, judgments, wishes. And I'll come back in a few minutes with some additional prompts if you feel stuck. So feel free to keep writing. I put a couple of extra prompts in the chat box, but I'll read them here for anyone that is watching the recording. So some of the things that might have come up during the visualization relate to these questions. The first being, what were the routines that you participated in at that time, and just being really specific and clear about what those were. 2, when you look at your life now, what is different about your time, work, or activities? And what is different about your responsibilities than it was then? 3, what parts of the old you or routines did you love the most and why? Which routines do you want to bring back and why? And then, if it's applicable, a moment of honesty in answering what challenging, mean, or judgmental thoughts came up for you during the visualization. All right, for about 2 or 3 more minutes, and then we'll hop back in. All right, I'm going to bring us back here. So as you move through the visualization, you might have had a plethora of experiences. You might have had a lovely experience remembering a great time in your life, no judgment, no desire to be back in that place. On the other hand, you might have gone through it and felt frustrated, wondering, why is it that I could do that so well then, and maybe I don't feel that now. Wherever you are, there's always opportunity for releasing and forgiveness. Even if you felt wonderful going through that, there's always an opportunity for something. So the next part that I want to move into is the Ho'oponopono, which is essentially about taking responsibility for everything in your life. It's an act of kind of acceptance and letting go of different energies that exist in your world. I personally know it and have used it in the past from a forgiveness standpoint. So the idea behind the practice, and this will mostly be homework and something that you can come back to again and again, but I'll just kind of walk you through the example and what it means and how to do it. So to start off the practice, you would essentially list out anything that came up that felt bad during the visualization, any reasons that maybe you're upset with yourself, or mean thoughts, or, the people, places, things that you feel like are blocking you from moving forward, societal things, personal experiences, relationships, whatever it is. I've done this a lot when it comes to like money mindset work, and you'll see why in a little bit, but the practice is writing all of these things down, all of these memories, all of the things people have said to you, whatever it is. And then you walk through each item on the list, you'll read the item out loud, and then you'll repeat the phrase, which is, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you. And it's something that you're saying to yourself. And I like to have a list because I like to physically cross the thing off after I say it. You can kind of do it however you like. A lot of people do it in a lot of different ways. But essentially, let's say an example for myself would be, why is it that I can't wake up at 5:30 in the morning anymore? And that's something that I really prided myself on for a long time. And so it would just say, doesn't wake up at 5:30 anymore. And then I would say, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you. And personally, I would cross it off the list. And so this is just a practice of forgiveness. You can say, most of the scripts say, please forgive me. I sometimes say, I forgive you if it's something that feels like outside of myself. That just feels better to me. I am changing it. I know that's not the traditional practice of it, but if something resonates a little bit better with you, sometimes it's nice to kind of change up the wording there. So just to do a little practice for yourselves, I would love to have you look at the list of things that you brain dumped, things that you wrote out. If there were any challenging aspects to the visualization for you, maybe just pick one or two of them, and then take a moment to yourselves to read those one or two things out loud and repeat the phrase, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you. And then let it go. And so for those of you that are here live, take this with you afterwards, work your way through your list, do the practice, see what comes up for you. If nothing comes up, that's fine. That's why it's a practice. We just see kind of what what we feel when we do some of these different things. If you're watching the recording, feel free to pause it here and just go through the whole list now before you move on. Okay, so now we get to move into the planning part, which I know I have a lovely Virgo on here right now who I know just loves the planning, and also my lovely Sagittarius mother. So, we've talked a little bit about what routines you're here to refresh. We've observed kind of a time in your life where you felt really good about your life, about your routines, whatever it was. And now, before we kind of work on the rebuilding piece, I have a couple of more reflection questions for you to noodle on. The first one is, I'd like for you to write out what kind of routine you're specifically wanting to refresh, right? We talked about how oftentimes people come with like a morning routine, but maybe it's an evening routine before bed, or a pre-work, or an ending your workday, whatever category it falls into. Could be just like a general wellness routine, a learning, academic, educational routine, you name it. But I'd like you to, just for the purposes of the rest of the workshop, to just pick one. There might be multiple that you're thinking about, but let's just pick one. And then in looking at that routine that you've written out, I want you to write down for yourself what result you want to see from this routine. What is it that you are hoping that by implementing this, you will change in your life, or you will bring into your life? Because if you're not clear on the result that you're looking for, then there's really no way of knowing if a routine is serving you or not. And so this feeling of being scattered, this feeling of being unproductive, this feeling of being inconsistent typically stems from us not actually knowing what it is we're trying to move toward, or we're trying to bring into our lives. So I think it's really important to get clear on the result. Am I frozen? Okay. Frozen on my end. So I still feel like I'm frozen. Yep. Okay. Continuing. Okay, we're back. So once you've written out which routine you specifically want to refresh, and then what result it is you're hoping to get from that, I want you to think back to your visualization. And if there was anything about that moment in time, those routines, that version of yourself that you would like to bring forward into this new routine, list that out, see what kind of feels right. And again, I really encourage you to sit with some of these decisions and ask yourself, is that something that I really think is going to benefit me, is really going to help me get to that goal or that thing that I'm hoping to get out of this routine? Or is that something I'm bringing forward from the past because of some past version of myself and a belief that that's going to make me that person again? Because that's not the goal here. Our goal is not to become the people that we were 6 years ago, become the people that we were in our visualization. The point is to remind us of a time when we felt the way we wanted to feel, so that we can recreate routines, recreate practices, and recreate, consistency in our lives that fit who we are now and who we would like to be now, instead of just trying to continue to bring the past forward. What I want you to do for the rest of our time as we're building out these new routines is I want you to think in terms of experiment. So I encourage a lot of my clients, especially when we talk about routine things, is to just plan for the next week, maybe 2 weeks if you're feeling really bold. But I encourage you to plan for 1 week. Plan one thing that you're going to put in for 1 week, and that's what you're going to try out and see what the result is. Because oftentimes, at least for me, I find myself listing out a whole new, very elaborate, lovely routine that I'm going to implement for the rest of my life. And of course, in about 3 days, I decide that I don't care for this anymore. And then I'm extremely disappointed. And so knowing myself, I now don't do that anymore as much as possible. And I encourage you not to do that, because A, putting in too many things at one time can be a challenge to implement, and B, setting way too high and lofty expectations when really we're in a mode of experimentation. We're in a mode of, what is it that's going to get me to feeling the way that I want to feel, rather than this is the thing that's going to get me to the way that I want to feel. So I want you to take the next, let's see, like 3 or 4 minutes and just write out version 1 of this new routine based on ideas that you have, things that you've seen, past you, future you. And we can pause the recording. We can talk through anything that anyone wants to talk through, but just give it your first shot right now and see what comes up. Okay. Does anyone need more time? Feel good? Okay. All right. So not knowing what routine you've written down for yourself, I am going to ask the people that are live, how many things are involved in your routine? You can just like put up a hand. Okay, I have 2 and I have 4. All right. So I want you to look at that list of 2 or 4 things and ask yourself, how will this help me achieve the result that I'm going for? And as long as you can come up with an answer to that question, I think we're on a good path. If you have that, ask that question to yourself and you look at your list and you think, I actually don't know how that's getting me closer to my goal, I'm going to encourage you to go back a little bit to the beginning of our planning section and kind of revisit some of those questions, revisit your why it is you want to have a routine, you want to rebuild a routine, and kind of start from scratch on that. But if you feel like you can come up with a decent answer for that question, the next thing I want you to ask yourself when looking at your routine is, how can you make it easier? How can you make it more enjoyable? And so I want to share a couple of stories of 2 of my clients who will probably be taking this recorded. So hi guys. When we've been working through some routine things lately. So one of my clients had really wanted to kind of establish a morning routine. And as we talked about in the beginning, it really started with this whole like, okay, this is what I should be doing. I should wake up at this time and I should go exercise and I should drink a huge thing of water and I should be stretching and blah, 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 on and on and on. All things that, like, yes, that would be lovely. And if that's something that's enjoyable and you get something out of and you feel motivated to do, cool, great, let's do that. But we just kept coming back to the fact that she kept hitting snooze over and over again, didn't want to get out of bed. You know, we've all been there. And so I asked her the same question of, how can you make this easier? And we kind of went back and forth on some things. And so in getting really clear on what the goal was, I don't want to press snooze. and I would like to do some stretches in the morning. Those were like what we boiled it down to. That was like the most important thing for her to get out of this routine situation. And so I asked her a question, and I encourage you all to think about this question as well, is when it comes to that routine, if you didn't have to do anything, you didn't have to meet any expectations, there was no one watching, there was no wrong decision, what is it that you would do during that time? What would your routine actually look like? And her answer was, I would watch Netflix when I woke up in the morning. And I was like, okay, cool. Why don't you watch Netflix when you wake up in the morning? And she was like, I can't watch Netflix. Like, I'm not supposed to watch Netflix in the morning. I can't do that. I'm like, well, maybe that's not long-term, like what you want your morning routine to consist of. That's fine. But if the barrier right now, the problem right now is snoozing and getting out of bed, then what's the thing that's going to motivate you to get out of bed? And let's just do that. And so that was watching one show on Netflix. Just so happened that she could stretch while she was watching that show on Netflix and drink her water. Like, okay, now we're habit stacking. Very fun. So I share that story because I think oftentimes we get into this mindset with routines or with rituals or with consistency where it's like, it should be a little hard and like, it should be a little bit like punishment. And why? It doesn't have to be. And so I know for her, I think she maybe watched Netflix like 2 mornings in a row, and that was it. I'm not entirely sure if she ever went back to watching Netflix in the morning, but it was that initial thing that she needed to overcome this like bigger idea of how do I have this perfect morning routine. And so when you're looking at yours, and one of the questions I will ask you, and I'm just going to ask you now, is what are some of the barriers that could keep you from doing that? What are the things that are coming up that keep you from doing that thing that you keep saying you want to do, but you're not doing? And whatever that barrier is, that's the thing. That's the only thing that you need to focus on right now for the next week, for the next 2 weeks, whatever it is, when it comes to your routine. And that's where I would encourage you to boil it down to one thing that you're going to add in to create this routine. What's the one thing that's going to get you moving, going to get you into that mindset? Even if it seems like something that you shouldn't, quote, do, or that isn't like what all the fancy schmancy, really motivated people supposedly do with their time. This is about creating a space for yourself to be you and to become the you that you want to be. And part of that is finding enjoyment in the routines that you're implementing. So as you're building this out and as you're writing out your plan for the next week, which is what our next step here is, I want you to think about what's the barrier and how am I going to overcome that barrier? And what's the nicest, easiest, most fun way that I can overcome that barrier and treat myself with some love and kindness? I had a similar conversation with another client about a morning routine, someone who had been very good at having a very consistent routine of waking up and drinking a glass of water and doing yoga and then having coffee and then reading a book and all of these things. And all of a sudden, she was like, I can't do it anymore. I can't get myself to do this. Turns out she had just had her boyfriend move in with her, a little bit of a life change. He was working in the dining room where she normally did her yoga, another life change. So thinking about the environment that you're in as well when you're doing these plans, and thinking about what are the things that are kind of getting in your way that are making you feel like, oh, I can't do this anymore. Oh, I've failed here. When in reality, the environment around you has just changed. So you have to adjust yourself and your practices a little bit as well. So these are just a couple of things to consider as you're building out new routines, as you're refreshing, as if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling scattered, if you're feeling like your routines aren't working anymore. It might just be that some external factor has changed. Or it might just be that you need a little bit more fun and tender loving care in your life, and you don't need to beat yourself up so much about not being able to do the thing that you used to do. And instead finding something that serves this new version of yourself. So minimizing barriers, huge part of setting up yourself for success when it comes to a new routine. Habit stacking is also a great way to look at, things that you don't find as enjoyable. What can you do that is really enjoyable while you're trying to do that, like the stretching while the watching of the Netflix. And then I also just encourage you to do less right off the bat. Pick one thing, implement it for a week, pick a second thing, implement that for a week. Adding a full list of things you want to do all at once is a really good way to overwhelm yourself, to frustrate yourself, to make you feel like you didn't accomplish what you wanted to accomplish, when in reality, you just maybe need a little bit slower roll. And it's a better way to experiment and see if those things are actually moving you closer to your desired outcome. So that is what I have for you tonight. I have a little wrap up here, but I'm curious if anyone wants to share any ahas that they had today, anything that kind of came up when we talked about routines and changing your routines, or any questions that you want to dive into.
I think what you said about making it enjoyable was kind of an aha, because I think you're right. When we talk about routine isn't always a real pleasant word, depending, I guess, on how you define it. And so to make it easier and more enjoyable, I immediately started thinking of like where I was going to do it, and to do it, because it's so pretty in fall right now that doing anything outside, looking at a beautiful tree, would make it more enjoyable. And then I thought of doing it in conjunction with the cup of coffee, because I'm going to enjoy that and do that anyway. So if I want to do my morning pages, then I can do it with my coffee, looking at a pretty tree, and that'll just make the whole thing really enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. I don't often it's a very good book. It has a lot of really good information. It is very male. So I just lightly recommend the book. It does have some really interesting things around things like habit stacking, or, finding that, like, how do you, the enjoyment piece out of it. It's just a little intense personally for my liking, which is why I don't always recommend it up front, but it is a wonderful, kind of technical read around habits and routines and things like that. And he does talk about things of that nature, excuse me. But yeah, I mean, sitting and doing your morning pages in a closet somewhere where you're just like, I have to do this. This is the thing that I have to do. I would be curious to see if you did that for a week, where you just did it kind of out of frustration, and then you did it in a lovely place, what the difference in the pages would be, and the content, and just your general mindset. Because yeah, I think that setting really affects how your routines kind of benefit you. If you're just pissed off the whole time, is it really worth doing the morning pages? Is it really helping you if you're mad? Is it really helping you if you're like, I hate this, I don't want to do this anymore? So that's part of my mentality around it too, is if I'm miserable the whole time and I really don't want to be doing this, can it really be that good for me? Because I'm just kind of mad the whole time. But I appreciate you sharing that. Anything else?
Yeah, that really stuck with me too, this idea of enjoyment. And just that I appreciated the initial grounding and kind of thinking about both the visualization, but then the letting go of judgment, because I think sometimes I see routines as if I can just do this, everything else will be fine. You know, like if I can just check this off the list, then I have done good today. And realizing that it's not that black and white, and tying it to that isn't actually that productive in helping establish it. So I also liked the, you know, starting with the outcome and then mapping backwards, because I think there's so many voices and prescriptions of, like you said, what time should you wake up? What is a good morning routine? And for me, I was looking more at the nighttime one, because I find myself just scrolling really late into the night. And so I was thinking about, what does it mean to be like well rested? And what is it serving me? So I'm still trying to figure out what putting my phone physically away could be tied to fun, but at least like lowering the barriers to doing that, or setting an alarm or something like that to be like, hey, you don't need this anymore. You can go to bed without a screen in your face. So that's what I'm going to be puzzling on after this workshop.
Well, and I think that that's a good point too, that there isn't always like a direct joyful thing that goes along with it. But that one is one that I've thought about a lot as well. And it is harder. I guess it could even be something as much as like, you put your phone over here and then you have like a really fancy pair of pajamas that you put on or something. I don't know, like things of that nature, where it's like less of a like fun thing and more of like a mini reward, I guess, that could go along with that. That is a good point though, that not everything has this, like, can't just watch Netflix while you stretch. It doesn't always work as easily as that. But I do think that releasing understanding the outcome, understanding what you hope to get out of it, but also releasing the attachment to that is important, because that's where I found myself a lot was, you know, I used to wake up at this time and I used to drink hot lemon water and I used to read for 30 minutes and my life was so smooth at that point. So it must be those three things that made my life so great at that moment. And like, in reality, those three things didn't really make my life better. I mean, I'm sure they did make it better in some way, but when I was prepping for this workshop and I was thinking about why this had come up for me personally, that's where I got into the question of like, when you were in that visualization, what was your life like at that point? Because I often find myself judging myself now against my 2016 self, who lived alone, didn't have a dog, didn't, like traveled for work and didn't have a lot of responsibilities in life. And it was like, yeah, waking up and drinking lemon water and putzing around my house was super easy. Now there's a person who's riding a Peloton behind me that I can hear, and a dog that has a lot of needs. And I'm a different person. I don't have work that people expect me to be on at 8:30 in the morning, So like, I think for me, doing that visualization and then having that, like, what's different about my life now, allowed me to kind of get out of that headspace of like, oh, those three things I did in the morning are what made my life the way it was. When in reality, it was like, no, I enjoyed those morning routines because of what was going on in my life at the time, and the time and space and creativity, whatever that I was in. And that's not where I'm at now. Right now, rest is a little bit more important to me than getting up at 5:30 in the morning. And, just sitting outside is more important to me than whatever it was I used to do. So I think hopefully people got that out of the visualization, as well as it's not necessarily a comparison piece. It's a like, things are different now. You have probably different responsibilities. Your life probably doesn't look the same as it did whenever that time was that you were in rose-colored glasses, absolutely rocking your routine. So always things to think about. I very much encourage you to think about, how can you make things easier? How can you make them more fun? How can you eliminate barriers as much as possible? And how can you just generally do less? I'm just all in on like not doing so much all the time, and not trying to add in too much to our lives. So yeah, that is the workshop.
I have one thing to add
Oh,
to what
yeah.
Amanda said um, about the phone at night. Just an idea that came to me is that, at night we say good night to things that are important to us. So, we say good night to our dog or our cat or our husband or, our roommate. And, it might be interesting just saying goodnight to your phone, thanking it for all the great information it brought you during the day, the ease that it brought into your life, and laying it on a nice little pillow or something, and just, kind of letting it go, because I know it is hard to put down.
I
Yeah.
love that positive framing. It's definitely worth experimenting with.
Well, and that's like the ritual piece of the routine, right? Which we didn't talk as much about, like actual ritual when it comes to things, but there is that piece of it too. You're like doing things, but you can also make it more of like a special experience just because. I love that. I think that's fun.
And that was one of the words I used to talk about a time in my life where I was really in flow and stuff. There were certain times of the week and the month when there were rituals with a group that was, meaningful and fun and community.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe the next thing we'll talk about will be rituals specifically. But for now, we'll stick with routines. Let's see, 1 second. Yeah, what do we define as a routine? So, I honestly thought about that toward the very end of this, and I'm still doing a lot of like learning and research on routines versus rituals versus habits versus all of that. I felt like diving into the routine piece was a little bit less spiritual, I guess. While you can have routines that are spiritual, it was a little bit more of like the place where I feel a lot of people have judgment. And that's kind of why I wanted to start with the routine piece. Again, it is a little bit different to each person and kind of what that means to you. And so definitely a good opportunity for me to like share some of the things I've been learning about that, maybe via like email or Instagram or something like that. But the routine ritual thing has been a very interesting just back and forth, because there's ritual and then there's routine and then there's ritual within routine and then there's like, it's just, yeah, I don't know. I would say though, from what I've gathered, ritual is more of like something that has meaning behind it, or like it can be spiritual or whatever it is. And it's like putting the phone on like a fancy pillow and saying thank you, right? It's this like intentional thing that we do. Whereas oftentimes routines can just be something that we like get into that we didn't actually make a choice about. So while you were building routines tonight, there was a piece of ritual in it because you were trying to do something intentionally and you're trying to build something out. But in theory, eventually that routine will just become something that happens, sort of like a habit, but a series of habits, I guess. That's where I am in the learning process with this right now, and just in the general understanding of it all. But I think there's a lot of overlap and there's a lot of kind of differences, but it is important to determine it for yourself and kind of what you're hoping to get out of it as you're building it for you. All right. So I will have some announcements about upcoming workshop opportunities coming out in the next couple of weeks, because I'm still kind of determining what November, December is going to look like. And then in a whole new whatever is going to happen in 2023, which is where we apparently are now. I did just want to remind everyone that I am now doing deep dive coaching sessions. So that's a 1-day, 3-hour experience where we focus on a specific goal that you want to walk away with, either a solution or a plan or something of that nature. A lot of people are using that for like job search experiences, things like that. I have the next round of those that I'll be doing will be the last week of November. So if you or someone you know is kind of working through a very specific challenge, that might be a good opportunity for that. And then I have one-on-one coaching opportunities available as well. And hopefully some more things like this are just different ways to connect and be involved over the next couple months. So thank you all for joining. If you have any additional questions or want to chat a little bit more about this, please feel free to email me and we can set up a time to talk. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, evening, week, whenever it is that you're watching this, and I will see you at the next workshop. Everyone.